After completing this lesson, you should be able to define instructional systems design, e-learning, and blended learning, describe advantages and disadvantages of e-learning, as well as some of the situations when e-learning is an appropriate solution. Before we get started, let's go ahead and define the term Instructional Systems Design. Instructional Systems Design, also known as ISD, is a systematic approach to creating effective courses. Instructional design should guide the structure of any course and help to promote meaningful and active learning. Even though there are many different approaches to designing courses, experienced instructional designers like to combine a variety of methods and incorporate technology and multimedia to enhance instruction. Creating effective courses is a complex process. Skilled instructional designers focus on creating learning solutions that bring value to the organization by managing a project's time and cost. The success of your learning solution is measured by the performance improvement of your learners. Now that you know what instructional design is, let's define the term e-learning. E-learning is a form of learning conducted via internet, intranet, network, or CD-ROM. Successful e-learning courses are interactive, energetic, dynamic, and appealing to the learner's auditory, visual, and tactile senses. E-learning can be synchronous or asynchronous. Synchronous e-learning is done in real time with a live instructor. The synchronous e-learning experience is similar to that of a regular classroom, except learners can take courses anywhere in the world as long as they have a computer, internet connection, and access to audio or video conferencing. Some of the tools associated with synchronous e-learning are instant messaging, application sharing, and polling. While synchronous e-learning has the value of having a real instructor and ability to communicate with other participants in the course, it requires learners to virtually attend the course at a specific time. Therefore, adults often find synchronous e-learning impractical. To address this problem and to target a wider audience, instructional designers began recording synchronous e-learning courses and making them available to learners unable to attend live sessions. This is where asynchronous e-learning originates. Asynchronous e-learning is self-paced. It allows learners to go through courses as quickly or as slowly as they desire at their convenience. Some of the most commonly used tools in asynchronous learning are forums, blogs, and webcasts. Even though e-learning is a popular solution for many performance issues, it's mostly appropriate for increasing knowledge and developing cognitive skills. Even if the course follows the most solid instructional design principles, it cannot teach people how to drive a car, for example, because driving is a skill that requires real-life practice for best results. Teaching interpersonal skills that change learners' attitudes and behaviors can be effective through e-learning if instructional designers add simulations, serious games, and role plays. This is where the blended learning approach comes into play. The ultimate goal of blended learning is to combine several media into one course. In most cases, blended learning is a combination of face-to-face delivery with e-learning activities. For example, learners might have to complete the lecture part of a course via e-learning and then attend the instructor-led training for practice and hands-on activities. This blended instructional approach is becoming popular in higher education and can help instructional designers address different learning styles as it combines the needs of more traditional learners with the needs of the younger, so-called net generation. So, to give you an example of a blended learning approach, let's assume I received a request from a client to create a professional development course for chiropractors. For maximum effectiveness, I'll divide the course into two parts. The first part will be mostly lecture and will be delivered via e-learning. I'll also include many real-life examples, high-level games, and simulations. The second part of the course will be conducted in the classroom. Participants will complete hands-on activities and apply theory to practice. When stakeholders identify the need for a training course, they often wonder whether they should choose e-learning over traditional learning. As an instructional designer, you should be aware of advantages and disadvantages that e-learning provides and share them with your clients. We will first look at the advantages of e-learning. E-learning allows you to access courses at any time, anywhere, at your own pace. Many e-learning courses also allow you to go back and review course materials if you need to. However, e-learning isn't always a substitute for traditional classroom training. Just like with everything else, there is another side of the coin. Here are some of the disadvantages. Unmotivated learners will most likely not retain much information. Lack of immediate assistance when ambiguous information is presented may hinder learning. Also, low computer literacy may prevent learners from fully benefiting from the learning experience. While the development of e-learning is much more expensive than the development of classroom training, the implementation costs are significantly lower than those for instructor-led training or ILT. For classroom training, some of the implementation costs include paying the trainer, renting a training room, printing hard copies of all course materials, and much more. Alternatively, costs associated with the implementation of e-learning are limited to the costs of web servers and technical support. As a result, the overall costs of e-learning are much lower than those of ILT training. By now, you probably want to know how to figure out whether e-learning is the appropriate solution for your content and requirements that stakeholders provide. Here's some questions that should help you. What types of skills does this training address? If your training addresses facts or concepts, you can safely choose e-learning as your delivery method. However, if you're trying to teach psychomotor skills that require hands-on real-life experience, it's better to go with either classroom training or a combination of e-learning and classroom training known as blended learning. What are the goals of the training? To create a successful e-learning course, you should know what you want to accomplish with it. What are the goals? Why do the stakeholders want this course? You'll find that oftentimes stakeholders want something that they don't really need. As an expert, it's your job to point them in the right direction. Later in this course, we will address several ways you can help your stakeholders uncover real goals and, as a result, deliver a truly valuable product, not just another e-learning course. What is the motivational level of your target audience? We all know that motivation is important. If we want to learn how to cook, we'll have a better chance in becoming excellent cooks than if we just cook because we need to. Uncovering what motivates adult learners is key to successful course design. Once again, we will cover motivation in one of our future lessons. What is the learner's level of computer literacy? If you're delivering an e-learning course, you need to know what operating system your learners will be using, what browser they will use, and so on. It's also important to know what their level of computer literacy is. While younger learners won't have any issues navigating through games, activities, and assessments, navigating through the course can be a learning curve for older generations. Therefore, if you know in advance that mostly older people will be using your course, consider developing traditional classroom training or a very basic and straightforward e-learning course. Which generation do most learners come from? This question is linked directly to the previous one. The generation your learners come from will have a strong effect on the course you develop. Keep in mind that young people like a lot of interactivity, action, and games in their learning materials, whereas older learners prefer to go with linear courses. What is the geographic location of your learners? If you know that people who will be taking your course live all over the nation, they may not find it convenient traveling to one location just to take your course. Therefore, e-learning will be your best option. On the other hand, if your learners all work in the same organization and will only need to take the course once, you may find that classroom training would be your best bet. How many learners will the training course target? As we've already discussed, while the development of e-learning is much more expensive than the development of classroom training, the implementation costs are significantly lower than those for the instructor-led training or ILT. Keeping that in mind, think about the number of learners who will take your training. If you know that the training is geared towards a small group of people located at the same place, you should then definitely go with the traditional approach. On the other hand, if you know that every time a new employee arrives, the organization will require him or her to complete the training course, then it may not be practical to hold classroom sessions, and e-learning would be a way to go. How much money is available for the training? As you know, classroom training can get pricey because of the high implementation costs, such as paying the trainer, renting a training room, and printing hard copies of all course materials. The implementation of e-learning is not as expensive as that of classroom training. However, the development costs can get high. Before you begin working on the course, find out what kind of budget you'll be working with and plan accordingly. While the development of e-learning is much more expensive than the development of classroom training, the implementation costs are significantly lower than those for instructor-led training or ILT. With classroom training, some of the implementation costs include paying the trainer, renting a training room, printing hard copies of all course materials, and much more. Alternatively, costs associated with the implementation of e-learning are limited to the cost of web servers and technical support. As a result, the overall costs of e-learning are much lower than those of ILT training. Now that you know about the advantages and disadvantages of e-learning, see if you can complete the following exercise. Let's assume that the company you work for has just signed a contract to develop an e-learning course for the Department of Psychiatry at a local university. Your program manager has assigned this project to you. The client wants to train staff on emotional intelligence. The stakeholders believe that they know exactly what they need to help their staff better understand the needs of their patients. Therefore, they don't want you to spend time, money, or resources on conducting needs analysis. You have 6 months to complete the project. Based on the information you have so far, what approach, synchronous, asynchronous, or blended, should you most likely use and why? Well, here's a hint. Emotional intelligence has to do with being able to manage feelings. It's considered a soft skill. Training in soft skills is not easy because these competencies are relatively complex. Therefore, it may be impossible to train for all the situations that may arise. If you do have to develop a soft skills course, here's a few tips to consider. First, to make sure that your training focuses on appropriate skills, be sure to come up with clear, measurable goals and objectives. Also, consider offering lots of practice to learners through asking open-ended questions and developing relevant role plays and scenarios that can help learners understand how other people feel better. Videos may also be helpful in teaching soft skills. While you can teach soft skills through e-learning, if possible, consider a blended learning approach, as it will allow learners to participate in open-ended discussions and elicit additional questions.